I just booked a flight and was asked if I wanted to round up my purchase to offset the carbon used to fly. I did it. Eco-guilt is gone. I feel like I'm saving the planet single-handedly here. Just kidding, I'm definitely not doing that. Now that I think about it, I actually don't know how carbon offsets work, or if they're even legit. Like, I know they're supposed to be good and help offset what energy plants like this one in the background put out into the atmosphere, but how? In short, carbon offsets are projects you can invest in to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Projects like planting trees or installing wind farms. It's estimated that by the end of 2021, the global offset market was worth about $1 billion, according to the ecosystem marketplace. That's a lot of money, but does it actually go to planting trees and renewable energy projects? Is it just greenwashing? Can carbon credits actually help us reach net zero? Let's find out. On today's episode of Can It Save the Planet, we're breaking down carbon offsets, credits, and the controversy behind it all to find out if they're worth the investment, are making an impact, or just enabling greenwashing. I'll be talking to someone who is both a lawyer and climate economist.
When you look closer at these systems, the promises are being broken and the rules are being designed to let people lie, cheat, and steal.
To ultimately find out if carbon offsets can save the planet. Sponsored by undo.org. Let's start with a quick explainer on carbon offsets to truly understand what they are. To do this, I will be using this balance scale and these toys. The balance represents the net carbon footprint of the world. On one side, you have activities that emit carbon into the atmosphere, such as flying, shipping clothes, driving to school, etc. Obviously, the scale tips over to one side, so to balance or offset that, we invest in carbon projects that remove CO2 from the atmosphere. Now, the items I have here obviously have different weights, but the idea is that for every metric ton of CO2 we put into the atmosphere, we need to offset with 1 metric ton of CO2. Ultimately, the goal is to reach net zero, which is basically creating a balance between the greenhouse gases we put into the atmosphere and the CO2 we take out. Now, if you look around online, you'll actually see a lot of big entities from Apple and Delta to the Olympics and the World Cup pledging net zero goals by 2030, 2040, and 2050. Now, to help reach net zero, they invest in carbon offsets. Now, to consumers like you and I, carbon offsets are presented as credits we can buy upon checkout for booking a flight or buying clothes through eco-conscious stores. The price of carbon offsets can vary widely. It can cost anywhere between 60 cents per ton to more than $50 per ton. For companies, it's a little bit different. They make big investments, and we're talking about millions of dollars here, on projects that are meant to reforest land, scale up renewable energy, and improve carbon storage. So the more money they invest in protecting a forest, for example, the more credits they can subtract from their end-of-year emission reports and eventually appear closer to their net zero pledges. The problem is the transparency behind the money and where it's actually used. There have been reports of carbon offset schemes where the money invested to conserve a forest is actually being applied to land that's already protected. Wait, what? Yeah, this is where it starts getting tricky. So let me go back to using toys as visuals again. Say we have two forests, both owned by the same person. One is legally protected, meaning trees cannot be cut down and it already has investment from the government to be protected. So we have a happy, thriving forest. The other forest is not protected, meaning logging and all sorts of deforestation activity can happen here. So we have a sad, miserable looking forest. Now, if a company, say an airline, were to buy carbon offsets from the landowner, you think the money would be invested in forest areas that are not protected, to help protect more trees that sequester CO2. However, the system is flawed. Landowners are able to sell credits for both protected and unprotected forest areas. So what they do is sell credits for trees in protected areas and make a profit off of them, then use the unprotected forest area for logging and to sell timber. At the end of the day, it's a win-win for the landowner and the offset buyer. But it's a loss for the environment since there is no true environmental impact being done. Yikes. So to help me explain the nuances of this and find out if there's a solution, I'm talking to Danny Cullenward, the policy director at Carbon Plan, a nonprofit that's dedicated to analyzing climate solutions and holding companies and other organizations accountable. Let's go. Wait, why don't I just skip the flight and call him via Skype? We are trying to cut carbon emissions here, aren't we? Danny is the ideal expert to talk to about this issue because his core orientation around carbon offsets is based on open science, transparency, and accountability. Hey Danny, thank you so much for joining us. Are you ready to talk about carbon offsets?
I can't wait. I was born for this moment.
Danny shared many examples of carbon projects that are flawed, including one from Lime Timber, a company in California that is calling out the issues in the regulatory system.
The CEO of this company has earned credits in California's multi-billion-dollar carbon offset system for protecting land that he is legally obligated under the terms of a conservation easement to protect and to not aggressively harvest. But the rules of that system let him say, for the purposes of earning a credit, that he would cut all those trees down, even though he is not allowed to by law. That's a failure of a regulatory system to design a real promise.
That's insane. What are some of the other examples that you've analyzed of companies getting away with, could you say, fraud?
Fraud is a very specific word, and I think what makes me so uncomfortable about these programs, fraud is when somebody's like deliberately breaking a rule. And what's so insidious about the worst of these programs is that the rules are set up to let people cheat. You are complying with the rules when you are cheating. And that's what's so insidious about them. It is not fraudulent to earn these credits. It is perfectly legal to do.
So is it fair to say that all carbon offset projects are bad and this is just a system of greenwashing?
I think it's too far to say that all projects are bad. Where I've come down is it's almost impossible to design a system that protects against the kinds of games we're talking about. I used to be more optimistic. I used to think we could do a better job. But the more criticism that's come out from the academic community and from investigative journalists, the companies and industries and governments that involve themselves in these programs have not responded by saying, okay, let's do better. Let's fix the problems that have been designed. They have primarily said the critics are wrong, the critics are out to get us, and everything we do is perfect. You're telling the liars and cheaters, keep going. And I think that's what makes this so impossible. Now, I want to contrast this. That's not all projects are bad. Some people are actually trying to do a good job.
Well then, this system turns out to be way more flawed than I thought. Do you see a future in which this whole carbon offset system gets reformed and helps us get to net zero?
We are going to need to figure out how to clean up pollution. We're going to need to do things to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, to clean up the parts of the pollution we can't fix on the ground. And the people who want to do a good job with that have to compete against cheaters in markets that compete on price, and the cheaters win. And so long as we have weak rules, the cheaters will keep winning.
Although the current system seems bleak, there are other ways in which people like you and I can get involved and try to make an impact. So then what would you recommend people do with their money instead of donating it to a carbon offset?
I think you should be putting your money into political groups and environmental groups that reflect your values. Spend that money on things that create broader systemic change. And at a minimum, donate to your food bank. Spending money on philanthropy that directly connects with people will do so much more for the world than sending off $5 or $10 into the ether into a system of stickers that are designed to certify promises that historically nobody has really wanted to meet. And when it comes to cleaning up pollution we can't get rid of, it's about policy change. It's not about individual behavioral action. So channel your energy, channel your money into systemic change that resonates with your values and your goals.
Well, seems like we have our answer. Let's recap. But first, I want to take a moment to thank undo.org for sponsoring this episode. They teamed up with us because there's an urgent issue that deserves more attention now: the massive microplastics problem caused by cigarette butts. Each year, the tobacco industry produces more than 6 trillion cigarettes. And cigarette butts, they're one of the most littered items on Earth, and they're made with microplastics. Microplastics have been found in our food, our water, the air, and inside of us. Recent studies even indicate links between microplastics and mutations in DNA. To learn more about how you can get involved, visit undo.org. Now, back to the episode. So far we've learned 3 things. Number 1, carbon offsets are extremely nuanced. Number 2, carbon credits are systematically flawed. And number 3, we need to invest in other solutions. So, can carbon offsets help save the planet? No, they cannot. At least not in their current form or system. As Danny helped us see, the system is too flawed and is in need of serious reformation. So what are the solutions? Because this seems pointless. Well, first, we need better policy for a number of things, starting with financial regulation. We need transparency and accountability on how credits are transacted and moving, who's making what claims, who's buying, who's paying, and most importantly, what true impact and difference are these credits making on the environment? But we also need better policies all around on things like reducing emissions substantially by cutting fossil fuels and investing in clean energy. At the end of the day, if you're looking to make a difference in the environment or reduce your own carbon footprint, start by looking in areas in your own life in which you can cut emissions, whether it be household appliances or your transportation. And much like Danny said, if you're looking to donate, you might be better off donating that money to community projects, organizations that support conservation and biodiversity efforts, or renewable energy. So just know you have options to appease your eco-guilt and make a measurable impact. Now, I'm gonna go back to playing with those toys to decompress.